In this video, we're taking a look at the reason and method for practicing scales to get the most out of them. Hello and welcome to Tuts, the show where we explore guitar playing and music theory to take our playing to the next level. I'm your host, Ray George. Very soon on this channel, I want to go over the topic of licks and how learning them can greatly improve your playing. But before I do that, I thought it would be appropriate to first explain the importance of and give a method for practicing your scales. I think a lot of people start learning scales and quickly become discouraged because they don't have the missing piece of information that links the knowledge of scales to actually playing or creating music. And I say that not only because I've heard people asking about it a lot, and also I have students coming to me who have learned a few scales but they don't know how to use them, but it's also my personal experience. I started formally studying music, I would say at the age of about 7 when I picked up the trumpet. And I was taught scales in my instrumental lessons as well as in classes in school, but I never really knew how to practice and use them to create my own music, which is what I actually wanted to do. So it's completely understandable that someone might become discouraged since, in isolation, a scale is pretty boring and ultimately useless without that information of how you can actually use it. That's why in my recent scale videos, I try to explain not only how a scale is constructed and played, but I also try and give you an example of how it can be used. But in order to get to that point where you can actually use it, and with any sort of proficiency, you need to put a considerable amount of practice into learning the scale all over the fingerboard so that you can find your way around the scale without thinking about where each note is. This brings me to my first set of exercises. These are probably the most basic exercises and the ones that people get bored with, but the main thing to focus on here is where the notes are, and most importantly, the roots of the scales that you're playing. I say roots, plural, because every form, shape, or fingering of scale on the guitar will have a root on the lower and on the higher string, an octave up. Some actually even have 3. So you should be aware where they are in relation to the form and be able to start and stop on them both ascending and descending. So for instance, if I play C major in the 2nd position, I play from the C on the 5th string, start by ascending the scale, go through all the notes in that position, and then come back to the same place, like this. I could also, from the same root, start by descending. Then I can start from the root an octave higher at the 5th fret on the 3rd string and ascend. And finally, from that same position, I can also descend. So those are the first exercises. In order to make the most out of exercises like this, you should always use a metronome and alternate picking. That way you can be working on your speed and technique at the same time as familiarizing yourself with the scale. And that pretty much goes for any exercise or practice that you do. As well as that, try moving all the shapes that you practice chromatically up and down the fingerboard, making sure that you know which key you're in at all times and going as high as your fretboard will allow so that you're also getting used to playing where the frets are much closer together. The next thing to work on when it comes to familiarizing yourself with the scale is the ability to move seamlessly from one form of playing a scale to another. For instance, if we look at the form that I just used in the previous example and compare it to C major scale in the 3rd position, there's clearly an overlap where the same frets are used in both forms. So we can use any one of those notes to move very easily from one position to the next and the next and the next, until you're all the way at the other end of the fretboard. One method to practice this is to ascend one position, moving into the next on the way up, and then descend the next position, rinse and repeat until you reach the end of the fretboard, where you can then turn around and do the opposite back down again. The second set of exercises I want to give you, and where things start to become a little bit more interesting or even musical, is to start practicing some movements that you'll more likely be using in a musical context. I'd say this is one of those missing links that gets you from just playing a scale to actually using it. The way we can practice this is by using sequences. These sequences can basically be anything, so I'd encourage you to go ahead and make up your own, but of course to get you started, I'll give you a few examples. The first is moving in thirds. Since this is a very common movement in music, it's a great one to practice. We start at a root, then play up a third, then come back to the second degree, up a third to the fourth degree, down to the third, up a third to the fifth degree, back down to the fourth degree, and so on and so forth. Here's how that sounds on the guitar. Another one is moving in sets of 4 notes. So starting at the root, play root, second, third, fourth, then to the second degree, third, fourth, fifth, back to the third degree, and so on, like this. You can also do the same thing using 3 notes. After you've done some practice and later on, once you start actually putting the scale to work, you'll find these patterns coming in very handy. For instance, there was a lick in last week's video where a sequence like this was used very literally, and I think it sounds pretty good. On top of that, becoming familiar with these exercises will actually improve your ability to play by ear, since you're more likely to recognize the movements within a scale just by hearing them. And it will also make learning new melodies, licks or riffs a lot easier and quicker because your hands will be able to make the movements so naturally since they've practiced them so much. Obviously, whatever you're learning has to be built using a scale that you've practiced, but that's just why you have to learn so many scales. So I really hope this video inspires you to actually work on your scales. This basically brings me to the end of what I'm going to call part 1 of my scale practice videos. I have more videos planned that involve playing over chord changes, so stay tuned for that. If you found this helpful, make sure to hit that like button to let me know. If you're unsure about anything I covered here, please ask any questions down in the comments section, as well as any other suggestions, comments or requests. And if this is one of the first of my videos that you've watched, welcome to my channel. I'm very happy to have you here because I'm sure that you're very passionate about music, as I am, and you want to find great content to help you find your sound and voice as a musician and really realize your full potential with wherever you want to go with your music. If that's the case, then make sure to hit that subscribe button to keep up to date. Oh, bird.